Today, we're exposing 12 Sainsbury's shopping secrets you can't afford to ignore. Most shoppers think they understand how Sainsbury's works, but behind the shelves are tactics designed to influence what you buy, how much you spend, and what you overlook. Some of these are subtle, others are deliberate. This video breaks down the strategies, shortcuts, and quiet decisions that affect your shopping every week. Once you know them, you'll stop wasting money and start shopping with intent. And the further down this list we go, the more uncomfortable the truth gets. Let's start with number 12. 12. Price lock doesn't mean the price won't change. When shoppers see a price lock label at Sainsbury's, it creates an immediate sense of security. It suggests stability, consistency, and the idea that this is a safe price you can rely on. Most people assume that once something is price locked, it will stay that way for a long time. Because of that assumption, they stop paying close attention. They stop comparing. They build routines around that price and trust it will still be there next week. What many customers don't realize is that a price lock isn't a promise, it's a condition. It usually applies only to a specific product size, a specific version of the item, and a limited time window. Those details are rarely highlighted, but they matter. Prices don't always increase in an obvious way. Sometimes the pack size changes. Sometimes a nearly identical product replaces the original. Other times the price lock simply expires and quietly resets at a higher price, relying on familiarity to do the rest. Once your brain accepts a price as fixed, it stops questioning it. You reach for the product automatically. You don't scan the shelf as carefully, and you don't notice when the price you trusted is no longer the same. In some cases, the locked item is positioned next to higher-priced alternatives, making it feel like a good deal even when it isn't the best value available. The real cost of this isn't just a few extra pence here and there, it's the habit of not checking. Over time, shoppers end up paying more simply because they trusted the label instead of the numbers. They miss cheaper alternatives, better sizes, and subtle changes happening right in front of them. Once you're aware of this, your behavior changes immediately. You stop trusting the sign alone and start checking unit prices again. You treat price lock as a marketing cue rather than a guarantee, and that single shift can save you money every single week. What comes next is even more subtle because it involves products that look exactly the same as they always have, even though something important has changed. 11. The own brand swap you rarely catch. Most shoppers trust own brand products because they feel familiar. The packaging is consistent, the price is lower, and the assumption is simple. It's the same product, just without the big name attached. Over time, people build habits around these items. They buy them on autopilot, believing the quality stays the same and the savings are guaranteed. What's rarely considered is how often own brand products change without drawing attention to it. Ingredients can be adjusted, suppliers can be switched, recipes can be reformulated to cut costs. None of this requires a bold announcement on the front of the package. As long as the product still meets basic standards and tastes close enough, most shoppers won't notice the difference. The swap doesn't usually happen all at once. It's gradual. A slightly different texture, a flavor that's not quite what you remember. A product that behaves differently when you cook it. Because the price stays low and the branding stays familiar, your brain fills in the gaps and assumes nothing important has changed. For families especially, this matters more than people realize. When you trust a product, you stop reading the back. You stop checking ingredients. You stop questioning where it comes from. Over time, that trust transfers from the product to the brand itself, even though the actual product you're buying may no longer be the same one you started with. The real issue isn't that own brand products change, it's that shoppers aren't encouraged to notice when they do. The savings feel obvious. The trade-offs are quiet. And unless you actively compare labels or notice subtle differences, you're unlikely to realize a swap has taken place at all. Once you become aware of this, the way you shop shifts. You start checking ingredient lists again, especially on products you buy regularly. You notice when packaging stays the same but the contents don't, and you realize that own brand doesn't automatically mean unchanged. This becomes even more uncomfortable when you see how deals are structured to push you into buying more than you planned, even when it looks like you're saving. 10. Multi-buy deals that cost more than buying once. Multi-buy. Offers feel like one of the safest parts of shopping. 2 for this, 3 for that, or any 2 for a reduced price all trigger the same reaction: saving. Most shoppers don't stop to question them because they seem straightforward. Buying more should mean paying less per item, and supermarkets know customers rarely challenge that logic. The problem is that multi-buy deals are built around behavior, not value. They rely on the assumption that you were already going to buy more than one, or that buying extra is harmless. In reality, many of these offers subtly raise the baseline price of the single item. The deal looks generous only because the individual price has been nudged higher than it used to be. Another detail most people overlook is unit pricing. When you slow down and check the cost per gram, per litre, or per item, some multi-buys don't actually offer a better deal at all. In some cases, buying one costs nearly the same as the deal, but the wording creates pressure to commit to more than you intended. Once the extra item is in your basket, the decision feels justified, even if it wasn't necessary. There's also the waste factor. Multi-buys are especially effective on fresh food, snacks, and household items you don't use quickly. You might save a small amount up front, but end up throwing part of it away or consuming more than you normally would. Either way, the store benefits from the increased volume leaving the shelf. What makes this work so well is familiarity. Shoppers are trained to associate multi-buy language with value, so they stop doing the maths. Over time, those small overpurchases add up, not because the shopper is careless, but because the deal feels reassuring. Once you recognize this pattern, your approach changes. You start asking a simple question: would I still buy this if the deal wasn't there? You check the unit price instead of the headline offer, and you realize that the smartest choice is often buying exactly what you need, not what the sign encourages. This kind of influence doesn't stop at pricing. It also affects what your eyes land on first, and what your brain assumes is the best option without you even noticing. 9. Shelf placement is deciding what you buy. Most shoppers believe they're choosing products based on preference, price, or habit. You walk down the aisle, scan the shelves, and grab what feels right. It feels like a personal decision, but in reality, much of that decision has already been shaped before you ever reach for anything. Eye-level shelves are the most valuable real estate in the store. Products placed there are far more likely to be picked up, not because they're better, but because they're easier to see and require less effort. Brands fight for these spots, and supermarkets use them strategically to push higher margin items, promoted products, or lines they want to move quickly. Meanwhile, cheaper or better value options are often placed lower down or higher up, where they're easier to miss. Many shoppers simply don't bend down or look up unless they're actively searching for something specific. Over time, the product you keep buying feels like your choice, even though it's been repeatedly placed directly in your line of sight. This also affects how prices are perceived. When a more expensive item sits at eye level, it sets an anchor. Everything around it feels cheaper by comparison, even if it isn't the best value available. Your brain uses what it sees first as a reference point, and the rest of the shelf is judged against that. Families and rushed shoppers are especially vulnerable to this. When you're short on time or shopping with kids, you're far more likely to grab what's immediately visible. The store layout quietly rewards speed with convenience, while making better value choices require extra effort. Once you become aware of this, the aisle looks different. You start scanning top to bottom instead of straight ahead. You notice patterns in where premium, mid-range, and budget products sit. And you realize that some of the best value items have been there all along, just outside your usual field of vision. This same principle is used beyond shelves too, especially when products suddenly feel new, even though they've only been moved or repackaged. 8. New and improved usually means something was removed. When a product suddenly claims to be new and improved, most shoppers take it at face value. It sounds positive. It suggests the company listened, made upgrades, and delivered something better. people rarely assume that an improvement could involve taking something away. In reality, that phrase often signals a quiet change. Ingredients get reduced, cheaper substitutes are introduced, or processes are altered to cut costs. As long as the product still meets regulations and tastes familiar enough, the front of the packaging can confidently announce improvement without explaining what actually changed. What makes this effective is timing. These updates usually happen alongside a redesign, a color change, or a refreshed logo. Your attention goes to the new look, not the fine print. Unless you compare ingredient lists line by line, it's easy to miss that a product you've trusted for years is no longer exactly the same. For regular shoppers, this matters more than it seems. When you repurchase something frequently, your brain fills in the experience from memory. You expect it to behave the same way, taste the same way, and deliver the same value. Small changes slip through because you're not evaluating it from scratch. The cost cutting doesn't always show up as a price increase. Sometimes the price stays the same, but the quality shifts slightly. Other times, a feature you liked disappears altogether, replaced with something less expensive to produce. Because the change feels minor, most people don't push back or switch brands. Once you know this, new and improved stops sounding reassuring. It becomes a cue to slow down and check what's different. You start noticing how often improvements coincide with subtle reductions, and how rarely companies highlight those details openly. This kind of messaging works best when it's supported by loyalty systems that keep you buying without rethinking your choices. 7. Nectar prices aren't rewards, they're behavior tools. Loyalty schemes feel like a win for the shopper. You scan your Nectar card, watch the price drop, and feel like you've unlocked a benefit others might miss. Over time, it creates the sense that staying loyal is being rewarded, and that shopping without your card would mean losing out. What most customers don't stop to consider is how Nectar pricing reshapes behavior. The lower price isn't just a reward, it's an incentive designed to steer decisions. It nudges you towards certain products, encourages repeat purchases, and subtly discourages you from comparing prices elsewhere because the discount feels personal. In many cases, the Nectar price isn't truly a reduction from a neutral baseline. The standard price is set high enough that the loyalty price feels attractive by comparison. Once you've seen the lower figure, paying the non-Nectar price feels unreasonable, even though the discounted price may simply reflect what the item should have cost in the first place. There's also the habit it creates. Shoppers begin to build baskets around Nectar deals rather than actual needs. Items that are discounted for members feel urgent, while others are ignored. Over time, this trains you to shop based on prompts rather than intention, letting the pricing system guide your choices aisle by aisle. The data side of this is just as important. Every scan adds to a profile of what you buy, when you buy it, and how sensitive you are to price changes. That information feeds back into future offers, shaping which discounts you see and which ones quietly disappear. Once you recognize this, the card stops feeling like a reward and starts feeling like a tool. You still use it, but differently. You stop letting Nectar prices decide what goes in your basket, and you start treating them as optional, not essential. This influence becomes even stronger when the product itself appears unchanged, but the amount you're getting slowly isn't. 6. Pack sizes shrink, while prices stay familiar. One of the strongest assumptions shoppers make is that if a product looks the same and costs the same, nothing has changed. The packaging is familiar, the branding hasn't shifted, and the price feels consistent with what you've always paid. That familiarity creates trust, and trust reduces scrutiny. What often goes unnoticed is the quantity inside. Pack sizes can shrink gradually without triggering alarm. A few grams less, a slightly thinner item, one fewer portion than before. These changes are small enough that most people don't feel them immediately, especially if they're buying out of habit rather than comparison. This works because your brain remembers the product, not the measurement. You remember how long it usually lasts, not the exact weight or volume. As long as the price doesn't jump, it feels stable, even though the value has quietly shifted. Over time, you end up paying more per unit without ever seeing a clear price increase. What makes this especially effective is how rarely shoppers check unit pricing once they're familiar with an item. The label is there, but the need to read it fades with repetition. The store relies on that familiarity to carry the change through unnoticed. For families and regular shoppers, this adds up fast. A product that shrinks slightly but is bought every week becomes significantly more expensive over a year, even though nothing ever felt different in the moment. At this point in the video, if you're already recognizing habits you didn't realize you had, take a second to pause. If this is helping you see shopping differently, tap like so more. People see this and subscribe if you want to avoid falling for the same things week after week. The biggest assumptions are still ahead. Once you're aware of shrinking packs, it becomes easier to spot another common trap: the idea that fresh always means exactly what you think it does. 5. Fresh isn't always as fresh as you think. When shoppers walk into the fresh section, there's an immediate sense of quality. Bright lighting, misted produce, neatly stacked shelves, it all signals freshness. Most people assume that what's on display has arrived recently and will last longer than items elsewhere in the store. What many don't realize is how much presentation influences that belief. Produce can be rotated, restocked, and repositioned in ways that make it look newly arrived even when it isn't. Items closer to their use-by dates aren't always obvious, especially when similar products are mixed together or moved forward on the shelf. Date labels add another layer of confusion. Use, buy, and best before sound reassuring, but they don't always reflect how long an item has already been sitting in storage or transit. Two identical-looking products with the same date may have had very different journeys before reaching the shelf. This matters because shoppers adjust their behavior based on these assumptions. You might buy more fresh food because it looks good, only to find it spoils faster than expected. That leads to waste, frustration, and the feeling that you misjudged something, even though the environment encouraged that assumption. Over time, this reinforces habits. People start shopping more frequently, buying smaller amounts, or blaming themselves for food going off sooner than expected. The role of presentation in shaping those outcomes rarely gets questioned. Once you're aware of this, you start shopping differently in the fresh aisles. You check dates more carefully, look beyond the front row, and trust your judgment rather than the display. Freshness becomes something you evaluate, not something you assume. This same reliance on labels and assumptions also shows up when shoppers try to save money by reaching for products marked as budget. 4. Budget. Lines aren't always the cheapest choice. Budget ranges are designed to feel safe. The lower price tag, simpler packaging, and plain branding all signal one thing: savings. Most shoppers assume that choosing the budget option automatically means spending less, without needing to think any further. What often gets overlooked is how those prices compare when you break them down properly. Budget items can come in smaller sizes, thinner cuts, or reduced quantities that aren't immediately obvious. When you compare the cost per unit, some mid-range products actually offer better value, even though the upfront price looks higher. The assumption that cheapest on the shelf equals best deal stops people from checking the numbers. Once that habit forms, it becomes easy to miss situations where the budget label is doing more psychological work than financial work. The comfort of choosing the lowest price replaces the logic of choosing the best value. There's also the quality factor. Some budget products perform differently, last less time, or require you to use more to get the same result. In those cases, the initial saving disappears quickly. What looked economical ends up costing more through repetition. Over time, shoppers build routines around budget lines, trusting them as default choices. That trust isn't always misplaced, but it's rarely questioned. The store benefits when shoppers don't stop to compare across tiers. Once you slow down and check unit pricing consistently, the shelf looks different. You start seeing budget as a category, not a guarantee. Some products are genuinely cheaper, others only appear that way until you do the maths. This same pattern of urgency and assumption shows up when products are presented as limited or seasonal. 3. Seasonal. Displays trigger panic buying. Seasonal aisles are designed to grab attention the moment you walk past them. Bright colors, stacked displays, and limited time messaging all create the sense that you need to act now. Most shoppers assume these sections exist to help them prepare, not to pressure them. What's really happening is urgency by design. Seasonal products are positioned to interrupt your normal shopping flow and trigger emotional decisions. You weren't planning to buy most of these items, but the suggestion that they might disappear soon makes hesitation feel risky. Missing out suddenly feels worse than spending a little extra. The assumption is that seasonal items are special or better value because they're tied to a moment or event. In reality, many of these products are ordinary items repackaged, bundled, or slightly altered to justify a temporary spotlight. Prices often reflect the urgency rather than the value. This pressure works especially well when shoppers are already mentally overloaded. If you're rushing, shopping after work, or juggling family needs, your brain is more likely to default to grab it now, think later. The display does the thinking for you. What often follows is regret. Items sit unused, food expires, decorations get stored away and forgotten. The purchase made sense in the aisle, but not at home. The store benefits from that gap between impulse and reflection. Once you recognize this tactic, seasonal aisles lose some of their power. You start asking whether you would still buy the item if it were in a normal aisle without the countdown atmosphere. Most of the time, the answer is no. This kind of influence doesn't stop at displays. It also affects how prices and promotions appear to different shoppers at different times. 2. Promotions aren't always the same for every shopper. Most customers assume that when something is on offer, it's on offer for everyone. You see a reduced price, a highlighted deal, or a special promotion and naturally believe every shopper walking into the store is seeing the same thing. That assumption feels fair, logical, and obvious. In reality, promotions can vary more than people realize. What you see is often shaped by your shopping history, loyalty card usage, and previous buying behavior. Two customers standing in the same aisle can be responding to entirely different incentives without ever knowing it. This works because personalization feels helpful, not manipulative. When a discount appears on something you already buy, it feels like a reward for being a regular customer. But over time, these targeted offers influence what you continue to purchase, reinforcing habits rather than encouraging comparison or exploration. There's also a psychological anchor at play. Once you associate a product with a discounted price, that becomes your mental benchmark. If the offer disappears later, the full price feels inflated, even if it's standard. That discomfort often pushes shoppers to wait, switch, or stock up unnecessarily the next time the deal appears. What most people never see is the offers they aren't being shown. While you're focused on personalized promotions, other products quietly disappear from your consideration. Your choices narrow, guided by what's highlighted for you rather than what's best overall. Once you understand this, promotions stop feeling universal and start feeling conditional. You become more aware of how offers guide your behavior instead of simply saving you money. You still take advantage of discounts, but you don't let them decide your shop. All of this leads to the biggest assumption of all, the one that shapes every other decision you make in the store. 1. The biggest assumption shoppers get wrong about Sainsbury's. Most people shop at Sainsbury's with a quiet belief they rarely question, that the store is fundamentally on their side, that it exists to help them save money, make better choices, and shop with confidence. The branding reinforces it. The messaging reinforces it. Over time, that assumption becomes the foundation for how people move through the store. The problem is that this belief changes how closely shoppers pay attention. When you trust the system, you stop challenging it. You assume deals are fair, labels are clear, and pricing is designed with your best interest in mind. You don't feel the need to double check because it feels unnecessary. That's where the advantage shifts. Sainsbury's, like any major retailer, is designed to optimize spending, not minimize it. Every layout decision, pricing structure, promotion, and loyalty mechanic is tested to influence behavior. None of this requires dishonesty. It simply relies on shoppers believing the system is neutral when it isn't. This assumption is what makes all the other secrets work. Price locks only work if you trust them. Multibuys only work if you assume they save money. Nectar prices only influence behavior if you Believe their rewards. Shelf placement only matters if you think you're choosing freely. Once that belief cracks, everything changes. You stop shopping on autopilot. You slow down. You compare more. You question why something is positioned the way it is or why a deal feels urgent. The store doesn't suddenly become a villain, but it stops being a guide. The most powerful shift isn't learning one trick or avoiding one product. It's understanding that shopping well requires active participation. When you take control back, the store loses its quiet advantage, and you stop paying for assumptions you never meant to make. That awareness is what separates routine shopping from intentional shopping, and it's the one thing no promotion can replace. What all of these secrets have in common isn't deception in the dramatic sense, it's assumption. Shopping becomes expensive, frustrating, and inefficient not because people are careless, but because they trust systems that are designed to guide behavior quietly. Once you stop assuming and start observing, the entire experience changes. None of this means you should stop shopping at Sainsbury's. It means you should shop with awareness. Check unit prices instead of headlines. Treat labels as prompts, not promises. Question urgency. Compare across shelves. And most importantly, slow down just enough to make decisions intentional instead of automatic. The biggest advantage you can have as a shopper isn't insider access or special discounts. It's clarity. Knowing how pricing, placement, promotions, and loyalty systems work gives you back control. You spend less, waste less, and walk out knowing your choices were actually yours. If this video made you rethink even one habit, that's a win. And if you've noticed any of these patterns yourself or experienced something that wasn't covered, share it in the comments. Other shoppers learn fastest from real experiences. If you found this useful, hit like so more people see it. Subscribe if you want more videos that help you shop smarter, avoid common traps, and keep your money working for you instead of disappearing quietly at the till.